And so his next section is, what about design arguments, right? These are arguments that say, hey, look,
this is where he critiques our end of the spectrum.
Yeah, right. Things perceived, they look orderly and that sort of things, and design, and therefore there must be a designer, right? And so he says, he says, and he kind of critiques these, but his bottom line is something like this. He says, it is unreasonably rational and that will require a non-natural explanation for some of these things. He says, I think that no matter how far we push back the natural veil on physical phenomena, there will always be good reason to think that the whole shebang requires a divine designer. But something important is overlooked. Though some sort of general design argument might be counted as evidence for a designer, I don't think that such an argument is nearly as strong as, and here's the important part here, our intuition or instinct that the cosmos has been designed. So notice what he's getting at is, we might be able to get to design, perhaps, but he doesn't think we get to it via argument, that is, via inference based on, propositions, right? That it's something that we get through intuition or instinct. What he suggests here, Plantinga suggests our perception of things, right?
Which, again, is kind of a different take, and one of the reasons why hopefully people watch the show is when you think of a debate, atheist versus Christian, what are they arguing? They're arguing the historicity of Jesus, or whether or not it's possible for the resurrection to have occurred through these different sources, or if you have the great William Lane Craig saying, here's the Kalam argument to say it's more likely, it's more possible that the universe started at a single point, and then it came down to a divine directive, and then that directive is personal, and then you have him enter into creation. So it's building this kind of cumulative case of scientific propositions that are
or philosophical propositions even.
Yeah, I mean, we would say that there's probably a distinction that isn't being talked about there. But when you have kind of a presuppositional approach, you are starting out with the fact that, hey, we need to look at a worldview, and what does your worldview entangle? To say, you can have the fact that the moon looks like it's old. That's in your camp. We'll take the fossils, and so there's this attempt to try and say, okay, God doesn't have purview over that. God does have over fossils, but presuppositional comes in and says, no, by supposing the biblical Christian God, he tells us that he has given us an understanding that he exists, and it's kind of imbued into us, that it's our intuition that kind of derives that belief. On top of that is probably not outside of there, because he'll go into that more, but that through those understandings we know that God exists. And so this argumentation that he's going into, that, and Plantinga does too, falls right in line with presuppositional understanding.
Yeah, good. So he uses this rather mundane example here. He says, in the case of perceiving that there's a table before me, right? I perceive the table before me. He says, I do not make a quick and dirty inference from things appearing to me table-wise to the conclusion that there is indeed a table before me, right? And we don't make that inference. Look, this appears to be table-wise, right? Therefore, there's a table, right? He says, rather, I just find myself believing that there's a table. And this belief is so automatic that it's merely tacit, right? Yeah. It's just, it's part of just it's just part of the deal, right? The given is what one philosopher put
when my
right?
wife comes home from work, I don't sit there and test to see am I just perceiving that she's there, or do I just say, hi, honey, welcome home?
Yeah. Or am I inferring that, let's see, I heard a car drive up, I heard the door close, the garage door, came open, I heard the door open in the house. There is a person-wise figure in front of me. and it's time that my wife would usually is home. Therefore, probably this is,
I can kiss that person.
Yeah.
My father-in-law has just had his mustache ruffled.
No, right? We perceive.
And we talked about this before, too. It's that understanding of here's a statement. It's raining outside. You in your office don't have the windows. That inference is, well, I see that you're wet and you're tracking in water. Okay, that's a good inference. Or there's the fact that you're lying to me because you were late and you're like, oh, I got caught in this rainstorm, where really you were just playing in the courtart and the sprinklers came on.
That's right.
So,
and what a great excuse, right?
But yeah, so this almost seems almost trivial because, this is what people do. They see a microphone. Here's a microphone. They don't kind of reason up to it, and so that's his point here. And I think scientists or an understanding of what science tends to do is say, okay, well, we can't even assume that, but that's part of our experience, our kind of universal experience as humans. So doesn't that kind of send up red flags as if this is a universal, as far as we know, at least on this earth, that people come to this, then shouldn't this be explored and understood within the context of how humanity operates, this metaphysical attempt of understanding?
Yeah, good. So he says, so my belief about the table is formed not by inference, but in what Planet calls the basic way. The belief is immediately caused by my experience rather than by my inference from previous beliefs. Now, what is his point with regard to this? Well, his point is, and again, he's talking about design arguments, right? So his point is this. He says, I think that some such faculty, this either sensus divinitatis, right, is what Calvin, he says, calls it. I think that some such faculty or disposition is responsible for the strength of belief that many of us feel when confronted with scientific facts about the alleged fine-tuning of the cosmos, or even with mundane weirdness like owls and insects, right? Just as we see, in quotes, that we're not hooked up to the matrix, right? I mean, we can't prove it, right? But we see it. We seem to know it, right? Or that other people have minds like ours. We see that the natural world around us must result from a divine intellect of astounding power and creativity. No inference is necessary, right? So that's his point here with regard to this issue of, perception and intuition and how we perceive things and non-inference arguments and that sort of thing, right?
Yeah, and the sensus divinitas comes from, again, Romans 1, where, it's been revealed to all creation, or all men, that God exists, but within our unrighteousness we suppress, we take that belief and we build it down to say, nope, that's not true. And in our unrighteousness, in our sin natural state, we object to God ruling over the universe. What, again, presuppositionalist does is say, no, you actually do, and here are points, even within your system of belief that you try to get outside of God, where you are actually using the same foundations that He provides to us within our worldview. So when you see, the starving children, oh, this is awful, God wouldn't allow this, therefore God doesn't exist. Why? Why is that awful? Having an objective value where all people can look at that picture of a starving child and say, bad, it implies all these things that the naturalistic person doesn't come up with. No, that's just a bag of matter, not getting enough sustenance, and hey, well, according to theory of evolution, that should be fine. I can go ahead and feed that child too. That's fine either. But either way, it doesn't really matter. Right. What is morality in that?
Right or wrong, morally speaking, yeah. And so so with regard to these various arguments, he says, so then whereas there may be decent arguments for God's existence from apparent design, right? He says what really compels us is, many of us, he says, is to see that God designed all this is a strong instinct to do so, to perceive that God designed it, right? It's again, this, we just kind of instinctively, perceive it, right? We instinctively, it's almost like intuition. we presuppose it. Actually, we think it, right?
Yeah.
So he says the unbeliever can agree that humans indeed have a habit of seeing God in nature, but attributes this habit to a kind of evolutionary trick played on us by our mischievous genes. So they suggest, we have the propensity to see it that way, but it's just the genes playing a trick on us.
Yeah.
And we say, no, it really is design. That's what's going on. And it's not genes. It's put there by a creator, by God.
Yeah. Even in Dawkins' God Delusion, he talks about the very fact that religion is helpful for the survival of the species. What he doesn't do in that book is then say, and we should be evolving out of that right now, so we should be destroying that. It seems odd that if there are things that are implanted in us that help us survive, and there are still a ton of people that have a understanding of religion, why is it that you're trying to advance the species in that way? It seems like that's a design attempt to meddle with nature that doesn't care about where it's going or the consistency or the ability to know things. But here he's trying to make us all atheists, which I'm assuming if it has a thing for survival, Dawkins is trying to kill us all because he doesn't want us to survive.
Yeah.
Or maybe he's the secret believer in God, and he's trying to be the Genghis Khan of the UK.